Lawmakers in France debate a bill to rout out radical Islam. Last week, lawmakers in France debated a bill aiming to rout out only radical Islam. The laws hope to help prevent radical beliefs from seeping into the community that will affect the whole country with plans that undermine national values. The bill's sponsor, Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin, said that the laws are designed to stop, quote, an Islamist hostile takeover targeting Muslims. The bill submitted for debate is one facet of Macron's bid to do what previous lawmakers tried but failed to do, create a tailored, quote-unquote, Islam of France. The French Council of the Muslim Faith created a charter of principles for Islam of France, completed by Muslim leaders last month after much commotion among the Muslim alliances. One of the measures required are associations that receive state funding to sign a, quote, contract of republican commitment to ensure French values are honored.
Okay. I think this, again, skeptical. I think this is all good news. However, it can get out of hand, okay? We have to be vigilant. We have to be like, just because it does seem like it's moving in the right direction, that doesn't mean there's not going to be too much government overreach here and there that we shouldn't be calling out, okay? Overall, skeptically, I think this seems pretty good and in the best interest of Muslims in France themselves. What do you guys think?
I think it's bound to fail. An Islam of France? What?
What?
Like, they just want to have like a soft Islam brand on it, like Morocco claims that.
Okay, that language is horrible, but the whole movement against fighting radicalization and segregation, that part I think is good. That language is horrible, but go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so there's different aspects to this, and we've talked about other aspects about this before in terms of the homeschooling, banning virginity tests. There was something else about like making sure that people trying to gain residency, basically something involving like preventing polygamous marriages. So those things we've talked about before, and I think those are more concrete, good, positive advances. But what I wanted to talk about with this is this idea of trying to take the Islamism, the politics, the political form of Islam out of Islam, trying to create an Islam of France.
No, like, that part is the worst part.
Like horseshit. Like, yeah.
That part is the
I don't agree with you, though. I feel like it's some sort of dance that they're trying to do to, kind of dance with this dragon every day. And I think it's also part of this thing, like the minister said, this isn't a bill against Islam. It's against separatism or fundamentalism or something. And actually, I think he shouldn't use that language. I think they should say what it is. It's simply about combating separatism, rather than defining it by what it's not, which allows your opposition to seize on those things. And they are giving examples. Like, so there was this left criticism of it, that because they went through these revisions with a lot of the Islamic councils and etc., they removed a lot of language like Islamic separatism or terrorism or fundamentalism. So then they're forced to give these examples of how it's going to work. And these critics are saying, well, all you're talking about is Islam. So this is actually about Muslims, but you're not saying that. Which was what they asked for, was for it not to be said, or they're trying to dance around what they really mean. And so that, in that sense, I think that does create an atmosphere of not going to work. But
Right.
at the same time, I think that I agree with it too, in that, you know, they are trying to do some good things, doctors, but they need to stop branding it. And I think he started to do it as saying it's protective of Muslims. And this is what I said when we talked about this once before, that this is actually for Muslims, and that's how they should brand it. This is to help them.
Yeah, I mean, the parts that I think Macron was explaining this, like when he was explaining the direction that they were going, it was a lot better than this, right? The part, I mean, this is the bill that includes all the plans. Susanna, correct me if I'm wrong, about fighting homeschooling and segregation. And if those parts are fantastic, and those parts helps the Muslims. Again, so here's the part that is horrible. You trying to change an ideology, it's not the government's business to promote ideologies, right?
Exactly.
And that's the horrible part. You just the way you fight Islam, again, not radical Islam, okay, because Islam is radical on its own. The way Muslims reform, Islam doesn't reform. Islam is just Islam. Islam is whatever is in the Quran and the Hadith. That's not reformable. Muslims reform, though. Islam doesn't reform. Muslims reform. Muslims reform by being exposed to competing ideas to what's written in the Quran and the Hadith. Most Muslims are amazing people because they're not as influenced by the Quran and Hadith. And that whole process of desegregation is what makes helps you get better Muslim. Like, look at, for example, compare the Muslims in North America to what the situation that you have right now in the UK and France. The segregation and demonization, again, part of the process, it should be making Muslims feel that they're welcome in this country, that they're not an alien in France, that this is their country. And again, I tell everybody the best way to fight Islam is to befriend Muslims, right? And more Muslims in Canada and United States feel like Canada and United States is their country, because they feel as if they're part of a society, which because they are. And most Muslims in United States and Canada, Islam is not, even if they're Muslim, Islam is not a major influence in their decision-making process or their lives, okay? But the more you segregate Muslims and the more you demonize them, first of all, segregation means that they are not exposed to better ideas than Islam, and demonization means that they will Islam becomes an identity as a way to protect themselves against the demonization. And that's basically the greatest food for radicalism. So if the desegregation, so the parts of this move that, again, is going to be helpful is not letting parents brainwash their children. So that's great. Trying to make Muslims be more as part of society rather than having their own areas and stuff like that. That's going to be fantastic. The part that the government is getting, like, here's an approved version of Islam, that's horrible. That's counterproductive. Go on, Susanna.
I wanted to provide a little bit more background. So it's also interesting to see that the far right are saying, like, some people are saying that this is going too far, and then people like Marine Le Pen are saying it's not going far enough. So yeah, the proposed law is one aspect of the French president's bid to do what his predecessors tried and failed to do: create a made-to-measure Islam of France. Separately, the official conduit to the government, the French Council of the Muslim Faith, was pushed to create a charter of principles for Islam of France, completed last month after much wrangling among Muslim federations. Muslim leaders were keeping a low profile as the debate opened. In ways small and large, the bill seeks oversight in the functioning associations and mosques, including foreign financing, and the aims to plug up entry points for Islamist ideology in the lives of Muslims. Mohammed Moussaoui, head of the French Council of the Muslim Faith, said at the Parliamentary Commission hearing in January that the new oversight of the association bill is, quote, useful, necessary to fight those who want to instrumentalize associations to counter French values. However, he expressed concerns that officials would use this tool to bother associations and the good students following the rules. The head of the Foundation of Islam, a secular organization representing a progressive Islam, called the new proposed law, quote, unjust but necessary. While Muslims are not mentioned in the text, it singles out, quote, but one religion, but one category of the citizenry, said Galeb Benchechich in a phone interview. It is necessary because French society, the French nation, is traumatized by attacks and the reality of radical Islam. He added, while radicals are minority, it's the minorities that make up history. And so a lot of this, which I think we would all be behind, is also related to oversight of potential foreign financing, which I think, like,
that part is obvious, yes.
I think that's sort of almost what's behind the idea of branding it as a French Islam or a Francofied Islam, as a way of making it distinguishable from and its own entity, not susceptible or against some of this foreign influence. But the thing that I thought was interesting, and I was going to bring this up pursuant to Armin's point about greater assimilation, is they make this comment about reducing the entry points for the opportunity of this fundamentalist style thinking to enter into Muslims' lives. And I think that that, as well as foreign influence, I think that that actually is part of an assimilation plan that could work in a way if you give people who are trying to assimilate, new immigrants to the country, migrants, someplace else besides the mosque as a source of assistance, maybe French classes, maybe, you know, learning the neighborhood, finding apartments. If you have some secular French entity that, or community center or organization that people can gather information from, that they can come together, that they can, you know, form different organizations to help people, that's going to remove it from necessarily, hopefully, the mosque, and put it more on what does it mean to be French? How do you assimilate to this society? So I think that that in part of the law is actually really helpful.
Okay, I just want to make in 3 points. First of all, if you are an anti-Islam, if you're like against Islam and against other religions, and you just like look at the title and you like, just based on the title, you're like, yay, this is great. Then you're not really you're not a skeptic, and you're not a critical thinker, and you're not doing it right. Okay, you're like, oh, I'm against Islam. France is saying something against Islam. I'm for it. If that's how much you dive into something, then you make a decision, then you're doing it wrong. But I'm not saying don't be for it. Maybe you are for it after you looked into it, so that's good. One other thing second thing I wanted to mention is that this might also be very helpful to Muslims in France, because a lot of French people are extremely angry, very angry, and justifiably so. But however, sometimes when you get angry, you might resort to solutions that are not justified or are an overcorrection. And part of that could include voting in or giving more power to far-right parties in France, right? So one thing that Macron's administration might be helping Muslims with by doing all of this is taking the wind away from the far-right parties in France, because if Macron doesn't do any of these things, and the French people really demand it. Then they're going to get the far-right parties in power, and that's going to be horrible for Muslims in France. So that's one of the, and the last thing I want to mention is that I wonder what you guys think about people who say, doesn't France already have laws against, the influence of religions as a whole? Like France is has some of the most aggressive secular, why do we have to have something specifically for Islam? Why can't you just enforce all the things that you already have? Has been working so effectively against France's war with the influence of the Catholic Church and everything has been won. They have defeated the Catholic Church. The secularism versus the Christianity. Secularism won. Christianity was defeated miserably, right? So why can't you just use the same rules and same laws and just maybe play with that, add to it, make it more, execute them? Why do we need something specific for Islam? What do you guys think?
Well, I think that you might need something specific for Islam because at this point it's got a lot of outside funding that is then reverberating in horrible terror attacks, people murdered, lack of assimilation of these communities, feeling of more allegiance, perhaps even to the foreign funders or to, Mecca or something than to their own country. Also, I think that the new influx of migrants is important, as I was talking about, giving them options to make them feel really welcome in France. If they're French secular options specifically aimed at groups that need this kind of programming, then yeah, it's different than the Catholic Church or the other laws about religion. But notably, some of them still are existing in this one, the ban on outward displays of religiosity by civil servants. And also this bill, I think, was introduced right on at the anniversary of when the famous separation in church and state was finalized, I think in 1905 or something. But so yeah, I think it does maybe
after Samuel Paty,
mm-hmm.
who was this bill is named after Samuel Paty.
The Paty bill. So I think in that sense about, because you have a large influx of new immigrants, it does need to be specific, particularly if they're bringing with them an ideology that's detrimental or the outside funding that you're trying to target.
But even if the issue that they're trying to deal with right now is Islam, the language could still be something that deals with that, while it will cover any other religion as well. Like, so for example, if Islam is the outside funding is coming from Islamic groups, sure, but you could say like any outside funding of certain values that are against France.
I think they did try and do that by changing the language and making it seem more universal. But then when they go to give examples, the ones that they're giving are Islamic specific, because that's what the majority of the issue they're having.
Fine. It's fine for the examples to be Islam specific, but is the language of the bill Islam specific? Do we know that?
I don't know French. No. I don't know the French language. So
yes, in some parts, yes, because that was what I was saying about the left-wing criticism of some of the bill is silly to me, because it went through all these machinations where they stripped out some stuff, or they and in the draft law, they don't say Islamism or separatism, because they don't want it to appear that they're targeting Muslims. But when they're asked to give examples, they mention Islamic separatism, Islamic terrorism. And so some of these left people are saying, aha, you're only mentioning Muslims. But you purposely made us change the bill so it wouldn't look like we're targeting Muslims. You wanted an example, and as soon as we give an example that's Muslim, that means we're bad and we're actually targeting Muslims, even though it could be another example in a year from now about another religious separate group. So it's like you can't win either way, whether you leave the language out or whether you don't.
One reason why it might be the the Macron's, everybody that is behind this bill wants to make it more anti-Islam than other religions, might be because of that's the most effective way of stopping the march on the far right, right? So if you're not signaling that, maybe that it wouldn't have that effect. So
it's a political calculation. So in the bill, though, they said an insidious but powerful communitarian infiltration is slowly gangrening the foundations of a society in some areas. This infiltration is, for the most part, of Islamic inspiration. Okay, so I don't think that you're doing anyone any disservice when you pretend what's happening isn't happening and you're afraid to name it, because that creates this void, and this void gets filled with fascists, whether it's Islamic fascists or it's right-wing fascists or it's left-wing fascists. So I think the language saying for the most part, because and some of the criticism was that they couldn't give concrete examples of the problem. And I don't think they need to. I think the separatists have shown them what the problem is. They're telling them, we don't believe in French values. We want to bring the republic down, and we will murder people in the streets to achieve that goal.
In cathedrals.
We will, behead someone in the street in broad daylight in 2021 or 2020. I don't even remember now because there's so many. But yet you have people saying, well, you're not giving us specific examples. This is a response to the specific things that the terrorist groups did. And they told us, when people tell you what they believe and they're willing to go out in the street with, you need to accept that's their stated goal.
And also subscribe to our newsletter, because if we get removed from all these platforms, at least we could reach out to you. And guys, by the way, if you subscribe to our newsletter, you get a free copy. Where's your copy, Susanna? Get it. We're doing promotion. You get a free. It's not even promotion. It's free. Okay, so if you subscribe to our newsletter, link in the description, you get a free copy of Why There's No God. Come on, I'm handing it out for free. Okay, it's a bestseller on Amazon, and you get it for free. So subscribe to our newsletter, and you get a free copy of Why There's No God sent to you. Link in the description.